I think I'm like most Beatles fans in that I am fascinated by the John and Paul dynamic. I mean, even when I'm looking at an old black and white photo of those two guys, I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm saying like, oh my God, what is going on here with John and Paul? Like something is happening. Or I could be watching them in a movie or in a special or anything like that, and they don't even, and it doesn't matter what they're doing. And they could even be on opposite sides of the room. It doesn't matter. It still seems like they're somehow connected to one another and that anything could happen when John and Paul are in close proximity to one another. Or maybe I'm watching or listening to them doing an interview or a press conference or something, and I'm hearing that Beatles banter and I'm seeing that eye contact and that body language. It's like, oh my God, something is going on here. Something is happening with John and Paul. And the same thing with the studio chatter, especially with the studio chatter, because something is absolutely going to happen with the studio chatter. The music is going to happen with the studio chatter. I mean, I think, in my opinion, this is me. This is just me. It's like whenever John and Paul are together, they're in that creative space, and they are, to a certain degree, like making music with one another, because the whole relationship is based on them turning each other on. I mean, right from the get-go, they turned each other on. We've all heard that John Lennon interview when he's talking about meeting Paul McCartney for the very first time, and he says, here's this young kid. He's better than anybody else in the group. He's probably better than me, but if he's going to make the group better, then like so be it. Plus, he looks just like Elvis, and I dug him. And we all know what Paul said about meeting John for the very first time. Paul said that he looks good and he sounds good, and I like what he's doing with the lyrics, even though he's got a crappy guitar. But you got to know that Paul McCartney was probably very intimidated, or a little intimidated at the least, by a young John Lennon, because even back then, like a force of nature. I mean, we've all seen the photographs, okay? And we've all heard, those old tapes of him, from that Village Fete that day in 1957. So Paul McCartney, John Lennon, both intimidated a little bit by one another, but also turned on by one another right from the get-go. And I think, to my way of thinking, this is the whole dynamic in a nutshell. You have, that sweet and salty relationship, making that creative tension between the two of them. That good tension, where sparks fly, where anything can happen, where yeah, they're not just turning each other on, but they're both saying, hey, no, you're not going to be better than, no, you're better than me. No, it's that competitive nature that kind of sparks everything, that drives them on, that just keeps on making them bump up against each other and say, we're going to do something here. We're going to show them. We're going to show everybody. And they're more powerful together. Yeah, they were like that separate. But when they got together, that is when the magic happened, right? And anybody can look at, the John and Paul through their own lens. You can see all kinds of things, through your own lens. But for me, I'm looking at them like as a creative artist, and I enjoy seeing like how the magic is made, like what inspires them. How does it all happen? And for me, like I said, it just seems to me like whenever they're together, like the sparks are flying, the magic is happening, the music is being made. It's like probably just it's probably just there in the air. And then when they get together, it's like 3 hours. They said that whenever they got together, they would always walk away with something. With 3 hours later, they've got a hit, or maybe they're in the hotel or the bus or wherever they are. Like boom. Here's a hit. They were always making music. They were always in that space. They were turning each other on, but they were also a little bit intimidated about like, okay, I gotta be better. I gotta top that. So it's all very fascinating. It's all very exciting. And it is that creative tension. I think it's all the heart of it, is that duality there. And just like think of this, okay? We all know like whenever we've seen two hot colors right up against each other, like a hot yellow and a hot purple, like for instance, like right up against each other, and you're looking at that, it's almost like the colors begin to vibrate. And we've seen that. It's like, oh my God, okay. And sometimes you're looking at those weird like puzzles. It's like, okay, look hard at this and maybe a number will appear. It's almost like that. It's like something is happening, all these weird colors, these opposite colors, these hot colors. This is the John and Paul dynamic, where anything can happen, where you can see anything, where stuff is just popping up whenever they're together. And it all comes out in the music, in this surprising music. Obviously, it's an emotional relationship. They love one another. They have to trust one another. They have to rely on one another. Otherwise, the whole thing is just going to fall apart. It's just not going to work. So it's a given That the two of these guys, like, they love one another. And it all comes out in the music because, we're feeling that. We're on that emotional roller coaster. We have that tension. Like, they take us up here and then they drop us off. Or then, like, they surprise us. And with all these different layers and contrasts in the song, it's like never a dull moment. When it comes to the Beatles, they're always making room for something new. They're breaking the rules, throwing the old rules out, and making room for all the new stuff in that creative space of the John and Paul dynamic. And you got to know that whatever emotion that we're feeling here, whatever they're making us feel, okay, whatever we're like coming back for more, okay, this is them. We're feeling this little tiny bit of it, but they're feeling it all over. It's the whole thing. As they keep coming back for more, it's like they're addicted to the creative process. They're addicted to like being together and like making it happen. I mean, and it had to have been difficult for them to do that. It had to have been difficult to keep that up. But so they did need time apart. And like John would go his way to get his inspiration. Paul would go this way to get his inspiration. And then they come back together and it all would work because they would always know, hey, we can always come back together. We can always come back and like make it happen because we trust each other. And we know that whenever we get together, like the magic is going to happen. See, now this is what I love seeing. It's like they challenge each other. And for me, being a creative artist, I like, thinking that, somehow you get in that space and like the inspiration happens. And obviously with them, like to a certain degree, they needed each other. Definitely they found out like they could do it without one another. But I can just imagine what it was like when they finally, like in 1971, when they were like off on their own, really and truly, like in 1971, it's like, oh my gosh, here we go. Or, definitely part of 1970, but definitely 1971 and 72. When it really was done and they really were like on their own. So I'm not surprised that Paul was kind of saying like, oh my God, like my other half, it's like, what's happening? You're feeling like I'm missing a leg, I'm missing an arm. It's like, it's just not happening. Okay. Obviously it was just momentarily. Okay. Now it's all different. Like after, when everything broke up, same thing with John. Now, John, I don't know. Yeah, with John was very different. He had the same experience where everything changed with him because he wasn't like, it was a different turn on. They both had different turn ons now. They both had that, they had to be competitive in different ways. They had to be pushed and pulled in different ways. I think this is why Paul went off and, I think this is why Paul wanted to go and do those like road shows or do those little gigs and drive all over the place in the bus. He was looking for that spark. He was looking to be challenged. He was looking for something different. And I think this is sort of like what John did. John totally moved to a whole different country, totally, had a whole new lifestyle and started doing all these different kind of concerts and causes. He was like looking for a spark, looking for something different, looking for something to turn him on. They both were looking for that turn on. Okay, now did they ever find it again? I don't know. To a certain degree, maybe. Probably. Okay, to a certain degree. And then they figured out how to do it like without that turn on, like without the spark. But I got to tell you, while it's natural that they would miss that creative spark, I also think it's natural that they would miss that competitive component to the relationship. And I'm not surprised that that competition manifested for a while after the breakup. We're still feeling, that spark. We're still feeling like the turn on. Whenever I look at the photograph, we're seeing like the turn on. We're seeing like the competition. We're seeing like that, creative tension. This is what we're feeling, like the Beatle banter, like the body language, the eye contact, and the studio chatter. It's just so exciting because something is going to happen. And like I said, like whatever it is that we're feeling, the roller coaster that we're on and the music, etc., we can listen to it like a million times. We can listen over and over again. Probably never going to experience what John and Paul were experiencing together. The turn on, the competitive thing, them getting inside their Beatle bubble, okay, where anything could really happen. I don't know, it's just hard to fathom. It's just had to have been a very special place for all this fantastic stuff to come out. And it had to have been based on love because what they produced was mostly like all about love. It was definitely something timeless. Always fascinating, the John and Paul dynamic. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I really and truly appreciate it. Until next time, peace and love one another. Take care.